Hi beer friends and beer fanatics. My name is Tammy, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I just will give you a little quick rundown about myself. I am a brewer and I'm currently working in the wine industry. So I started this channel because I am studying, or was studying, for my certified Cicerone exam. And I thought that maybe the things that I was studying or the way that I was studying or my feedback on the test, etc., would help some other people out there. So yeah, I started earlier this year, and so far I've taken my written exam and I passed that. And then I'm going to be talking today about the tasting exam, which I did recently. So before I go any further, you can see it's fall-ish season, and it's obviously Oktoberfest season. So I need to pour a beer so I can talk about beer. And fun fact, did you know that a beer can only be called Oktoberfest if it is brewed by one of 6 breweries in Munich? Otherwise, it has to be called a fest beer. So I went to 2 different stores looking for this, and I've got my Stein. Yeah, so I'm curious to try it. I haven't actually had it yet. I've had a couple other local Oktoberfest type beers, like craft beers, and they're good, but you know, I wanted to try the original. So here we go. Hope that's clean. All right. It's a nice color. There you go. Okay, cheers. Let's try it. Oh, it's so dirty. My glass is so dirty. It's very crisp and refreshing and light in body, which obviously is what you want. This is only a 500 milliliter glass, but if you're actually at an Oktoberfest or like a Volksfest, which is like the same idea, but like for more local towns, you order either by the half liter or full liter. So basically, if you can imagine getting a whole liter of beer, you want it to be something kind of light so you're not like super wasted after, you know, 1 or 2. Okay, tasty. All right, down to business. So the tasting exam. So if you've seen any of my previous videos or you know anything about the Cicerone program, you know that there is an online written test, which is 3 hours, and then you have to do an in-person tasting exam. So because I live in Canada, we are so lucky to have basically 2 exams scheduled throughout the year. That's it. 2 exams, 2 tasting exams. So up until maybe like May, there was nothing scheduled for my area. And because I actually work at like a winery now, we're basically starting harvest in a couple of days. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to take time off like next week to go to Chicago or New York, or those are basically the closest options that I had. So I kept checking the website, and I saw a few months ago that they had scheduled an exam for Toronto on August 22nd. So I thought, let's just do it. Let's just take it. Even if I'm not sure if I'm ready, I'll take it and then I'll know what it's like. And Toronto is maybe like a 3 or 4 hour drive. And then I can stay with my husband's family. So it was like a lot of things kind of fell into place. So I scheduled the trip and the exam. However, when I was home, I went to California for 5 weeks over the summer to help my mom with her surgery. I ended up in the ER, and I basically had really severe sciatica. So I could not walk, stand, sit, sleep, move. I couldn't do anything. So I had 2 thoughts. My first thought was, should I still do this exam? Because you can reschedule 30 days before your exam, or cancel it. If it's less than that, you have to pay a fee, I think. So I was really worried that I might not even be able to make it to the exam if I could not move or drive. My second thought was that I need to make sure that I'm healthy enough to get back to work, like for harvest. So I might need to just spend all my time focusing on like getting healthy and like doing my physical therapy and things like that. So by the time I got back to Canada, it was mid-July, and I really only had like 8 days or 9 days to decide on what I was going to do. And because I had already asked for the day off before I went to California, I thought, you know what, I'll just suck it up and I'll figure out a way to get there. You know, if I can't drive, I'll take the train or whatever, and I'll do it and then see what happens. So I kept my exam date, but what happened as well is that I got back to work and was just slammed with work because we had a lot of bottling and blending to do and filtering for our local provincial liquor store and then also Costco. So I basically was at work like every day. Like I think one week I worked like 7 days in a row, and some of them were like 9 or 10 hour days. So the reason I say this is that I really didn't study. I really didn't study at all. Like, how do you study for this type of exam? You have to do a lot of tasting. You have to try and do some off flavors. And I just did not have the time to go to the store and try and find different beers. And then when I would come home from work, I would be really exhausted. And it was like, I don't want to drink beer. So I basically didn't do a lot of studying. I maybe one night tasted some beers and was like, okay, you know what? I think I'm okay. And luckily for me, I'll take a little sip or a big sip. Luckily for me, in my case, because I had done so well on the written exam, I got almost 90%. I only needed to get 70% on the tasting and the demo. So I thought, I'll just, you know, hope that I do at least 70% well enough. So went to Toronto. I went the night before, and I would highly suggest if you're traveling to a test, you do that because I don't know why it was scheduled like this, but my test was at the Labatt like headquarters, which is in downtown Toronto. And when I say downtown, I mean like right downtown on the water at 10 a.m. on a Friday. So if you're not familiar with Toronto, it's the largest city in Canada. Traffic is horrendous. And even when I drove there the day before, I left at maybe like 1 o'clock. It should have taken like 4 hours. It took me just over 6 hours. So I didn't want to be worried about like driving there that morning, being tired, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to get there the night before, you know, hang out, do a couple things, eat, and then get up the next morning and go. I was also going to take the TTC, which is the subway, and then I decided against that too, only because the parking was so expensive. But I thought, you know what, I don't want to be delayed. I don't want to get like rerouted. I lived in Montreal for long enough to know that happens all the time. So I just was like, I'll just drive there and I'll pay the $30 to park. So parked, figured out where I was going, which was a little confusing, but luckily my friend was also taking the test, and so she was there earlier than I was, and so she was letting me know like how to get there, because at that point I started panicking. I was like, we're supposed to be there like maybe 10 minutes early, and I only have 10 minutes to get there from the car, and I don't know where I'm going. So luckily it all worked out. Wow, I will say the Labatt offices are very nice, very nice. You can tell where that money is going. So it was really kind of cool to be able to go there and see them. So another thing that surprised me was that there were only 3 of us taking the test. So it was me, my friend Ellie, and another guy whose name I didn't get. But I just was surprised because I thought they needed to at least have a certain number of people in order to hold the exam, to like find a proctor, to order the samples or the off flavor kits, to, you know, buy the beer. Although I'm assuming we probably just use Labatt something as like our, you know, mixing beer. So I was just really surprised, and I was also glad that they didn't cancel the exam because they didn't have enough like people taking it, because then we would have had to wait. And the guy that was taking the test with us, he had taken the tasting exam last year, and he said they only do 1 test a year in Toronto, and so he didn't pass last year, and so he had to wait a whole year to do it again because he didn't want to have to travel to the US. So then I started thinking like, okay, I'm really glad that I didn't cancel, I didn't reschedule, that they didn't cancel, etc. So, and then I was also thinking, I hope I pass because I don't want to have to wait a year to do this again. So, yeah, that's all that was going through my mind. Other than that, I felt pretty chill, pretty relaxed. I got up that morning. I didn't have any coffee. I didn't have anything to eat. I brushed my teeth probably, but then I like had some water to kind of like wash everything down. But like I didn't want to have anything that was going to affect my taste, or actually just like slow me down in getting there, like making a coffee or whatever. So that was my plan, like, you know, going into it, to not do any of those things. So we went back to the exam room, and basically the way it's set up is just like it is on the sample on the website. And I'll remind you again, I talked about this in one of my other videos, but they give you a sample tasting exam of what it looks like, how it's set up, what the off flavors might be, etc., and so on. Like it's all there. It's they're giving you the information, they're giving you the answer almost. So like make sure to check that out. And the reason that I say this like so passionately will come up in a little bit, and I'll tell you why why it's so important to like check those resources. So in theory, I will say the exam is set up where your first part you have 4 samples and a control. So your control is just this, whatever the beer is. And then 3 of the samples are spiked with something, an off flavor. 1 is not. And the nice thing is that the certified Cicerone used to have 6 off flavors that they could test you on. And then at the beginning of this year, they took it down to 5. So you really only had 2 samples that you had to, three samples that you had to identify out of 5 potential off flavors. So I thought, okay, that seems like that should be pretty doable. The next section is where they give you, it's called like style discretion. And so basically they'll give you a sample of a beer, and then they'll give you 2 options. Is it a stout or a porter? And then you taste it, and then you circle the one that you think it is. Pretty straightforward. The last section is similar to the first, where you'll have 4 samples. They'll say, does this beer have an off flavor? If yes, what is it? And then where did it potentially come from? And if it doesn't have an off flavor, you just put no off flavor, and then you move on. The important thing about this section is that it's only for beer that is like packaged. Like it's not in the process of fermentation. It's finished beer, and it's been like shipped either in a bottle or on tap or whatever. So in that sense, you should be thinking about off flavors that can come from like packaging or mishandling rather than like fermentation. So because we only had 1 proctor, and we started like a little late and things were a little behind, we only got like our first 2 samples, and then we all got 2 samples, and then we had to wait for the other first 2 samples of the first section. So I tasted my control, I tasted the first sample, and I thought immediately that I knew what it was. So I wrote it down, and then I tasted the next sample, and I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm getting with this, but I don't want to pick an off flavor, like let's say like diacetyl. And then when I get the next samples that I'm supposed to have, one of those is for sure diacetyl. So I wanted to wait until I kind of had all my beers in front of me. You have 45 minutes to do the whole tasting exam, so all 3 sections. And even though I know now that I got some of them wrong, I probably finished the whole tasting exam, like all 3 sections, in probably less than 30 minutes. Like, I felt like that confident. So don't stress is what I'm saying. Like, you have time. So I did my three, my three off flavors, and then I picked the one that I thought was the control. And then I did the next section where it's style discretion. And the interesting thing to me was that a lot of the questions that we had, like which style is it, I would say like 2 or 3 of them were the same questions as the sample practice test. So again, use those resources, they're there. And I want to go back to what I was saying earlier about using these resources. Is they tell you how to read the exam, how to answer the questions. Before you even go to your test, they'll give you they'll send a long email with like, here's what time you should be there, here's how to get there, here's how to check in, here's how the setup is, like all that stuff. And then they say like, we're not really going to go over this on the day of the exam, so like read it now and then remember it. So okay. And then we had the last section, which I also felt pretty comfortable with, where I tasted a beer and it was like, what's wrong with it? And I would say like, I think it's this, and then I'd say it's probably from the draft system not being cleaned, or it's from, air or oxygen in the packaging, that kind of thing. So I did all of those. Okay. And I won't tell you exactly what all of the questions were, just because I don't want to get in trouble with Cicerone. But basically, they weren't any like totally obscure beers or anything like that. Like, they were like very popular styles of lager or IPA or stout or like an amber. So it was like, you wouldn't be asked about like, oh, is this a Belgian quad or a something, like one of them was even like, is it this beer? Like a pretty unique tasting beer, what it is, or is it like a sour? And it was like, okay, well, I know it's not, I can smell it and tell it's like sour or not. So like, know your basic beers. Then you go and do a demo portion, which is where they give you like a piece of equipment and then like a little slip of paper with like a question, or like what it is, a prompt, I should say, sorry, a prompt. I was prompted to drink beer just now. So they'll hand you those things, and then you go to another room, and then there will be like a camera set up, and basically the proctor will come and start the recording, and then when you're done, you just leave. You don't have to like stop it or fiddle with it or anything like that. And basically it's like, here's this piece of equipment and tell us everything you can about it. Like, again, we're talking about service mostly, right? So it's going to be an item that you would use in service, and like, how often does it get cleaned, and what are the parts, and why is it important, etc., etc. So my ADHD brain kind of got a little rambly. You only have 3 minutes, but I probably talked for like 4. Yeah, so our proctor even basically said like, if you're still talking, I'm not gonna like cut you off at the 3 minutes, like mid-sentence or whatever. And I found myself talking, and then I would be like, and that's it, and then I'd say, oh wait, and there's one other thing. And so like, I just tried to get it all out. I didn't want to look at the timer and be like, oh, it's been 3 minutes, stop talking, and then like leave. I wanted to just keep going, and then they can sort of decide when they're going to cut it off. The interesting thing about this part is that we started our exam at maybe like 10:30 in the morning, and if you haven't eaten anything and you're drinking beer, and it's not even that you're drinking beer with off flavors, you are drinking some beer that's good. Like the style discretion beers are all perfectly good beers. And so I would get to a point where I was waiting for my next beer samples to come, and I'd be like, well, this IPA is really good, so I'm gonna drink it. And so I was just drinking these samples, and then I go to do my demo, and I'm like, yeah, I'm tipsy. I've been drinking for like the last like 30 minutes, and I haven't had anything to eat yet. And why are we doing this at this early in the morning? And why do we do the demo after the drinking portion? I don't know. So that's also why I kind of started rambling. Another thing I wish I had done, and this is just me, but the tripod with the phone is on a table, and I found myself kind of trying to like hunch down so I was in the frame and like also show this equipment that I was talking about. And I really wish I had just asked if I could sit down at the table, because then I could have had all the parts like in front of me on the table and not have to like hold them up as I was like disassembling this equipment. So I feel like that's a reasonable request that they would accommodate. So I wish I'd known that, and that's just a tip for anyone else. So yeah, that's my how the exam went. Our exam was on a Friday, and so they tell you that within 2 business days they will email you what the samples were. So they won't tell you like how you did or what your score is, but they'll say this sample was DMS or this sample was, light struck, whatever. So you can just remember, like, there's only 12 questions, so it's pretty easy to remember. They'll tell you, you can figure out like what you got right and what you got wrong, and then sort of figure out like the percentage. That's what I did anyway. So we got an email like Monday morning, and I found that I did pretty okay. I got 2 of the off flavors wrong, which really irked me, because one of them I thought 100% was oxidation. I smelled this beer. It smelled like wet cardboard, and it tasted like very like watery, like no flavor. So I put oxidation, and it was DMS, which just floored me, because I feel like I could pick up DMS pretty okay. Like, it smells like canned corn. The second one was a control, so I got that right. The third one, I'm also annoyed with myself, because I thought it had kind of like a sharp, like tangy flavor. So, and then after drinking it, I was like, okay, it tastes a little buttery. So I said diacetyl. Well, it was acetaldehyde. So that's the one I still think about. It makes me so mad. The fourth one was light struck, which was easy. Like, as soon as they handed us the sample, I smelled it and I was like, okay, there we go. The next section I did pretty well on. I know I said I wasn't going to tell you what beers were on it, but here I am doing it anyway. Beer break. This is really nice. The style discretion. So is it Immunocalis or German Pils? And I smelled it. I didn't get a lot of hops. I tasted it. It tasted a little like honey, like malty. And so I felt pretty comfortable choosing Immunocalis. The next one was, I almost feel like it was too easy, but it was like, is it an American IPA or a British IPA? So I smelled it and I was like, citrus, don't even need to taste it. So that one was pretty easy. The third one was, is it an oatmeal stout or like a dry Irish stout? And I went back and forth for quite a while. I tasted it. I didn't really get like more of a velvety mouthfeel. I actually thought it was a little dry. And so I chose dry Irish stout, and it was not. So that really bummed me out. And the thing that even more bummed me out was that it was a stout from Saint-Ambroise in Montreal, where I lived for almost 9 years, and I've been there and I've had that beer many times. So anyway, and then the last beer style discretion question was, is it a Belgian, I think it was like a Belgian triple or a Flanders red? And it was like, okay, you smell it, smells sour, okay. Or like sharp, acidic, Flanders red. So I got that one right, and then I got the other 2 right, the American IPA and the Immunocalis. On the last section, I also did okay. I can't remember the first beer. They also tell you what the beer is. They'll say, this is an Irish red. Does it taste like it's supposed to? So you're not having to try and figure out what kind of beer is it, and is there something wrong with it as well. So the first one I got right. I can't remember what the beer was, but I knew that there was something wrong with it, and I think I said diacetyl again, and I said like dirty draft lines, like it hasn't been clean. The second one was a New England style IPA or like a hazy IPA. I said no flaws, it's a tasty beer. The third one was maybe like that one was an Irish red, and there was something wrong with that, and I want to say it was oxidation, and that I put like packaging, like problem with the packaging, or like being left out like in warmer temperatures and not refrigerated. And then the last one was, I want to say another Belgian beer, and that one also had no off flavors. It was totally fine. So I got all of those right except for the diacetyl off flavor. It was not diacetyl, it was infection, which really irked me because that is not even something that was on my radar to study. And then I went through the Cicerone website again, and I looked at like the off flavor kits that they sell like for the certified Cicerone exam to practice, and infection was on it, and I was like, didn't even occur to me. So I kind of got like a 50-50, I think, on that question. So yeah, I did okay. And the reason I mentioned again, like looking at the sample test and that kind of thing, is that my friend that I was taking the test with, on the very first section, she put 4 different off flavors. And I hope if she sees this, she doesn't mind me telling her story. But she was like, I couldn't tell on this one, and so I just picked like whatever off flavor I hadn't used yet. And then she said, I didn't taste anything that tasted like Control at all. And I said, well, it says in the instructions that only 3 are spiked with an off flavor. And so like she hadn't even seen that part. So that right there reminded me again of taking the written exam, and my study coach, Annette, telling me, read the question. Like, what are they asking you to do? What are the instructions? Etc. Like, that's it. Like, don't do more, don't do less, like, don't overthink it. Just, the question says there's 3 off flavors out of 4, and so there you go. So based on the math that I did with that part of the exam, I think that I got at least like 72 or 73%, which means that I would have enough to pass and, you know, be a certified Cicerone. I'm just hoping that I got some more points with the demo. So it says it takes 4 weeks to get your results. So I'm coming up on like 2.5 weeks right now. So I'm hoping by the end of next week, or maybe even this week, I will have an answer. And I hope that it's good. Next week is my birthday. So if I get good news, then I'm going to celebrate. It's also the start of Oktoberfest. So there's a lot happening in the next week that, you know, I can get excited about. So yeah, I will say though, my overall thought is that I feel like I really hyped up this test in my mind, and it wasn't as scary as I thought it was. Even though I didn't have a lot of time to study, and I didn't maybe study in the best way when I was studying, I felt like I went into it and was like, yeah, I feel really confident. I was more nervous to do the written exam, and even after doing that for 3 hours, like in one sitting, I left the room thinking like, okay, I feel really good about that. So my thought is just that these tests seem really scary and overwhelming, and there's a lot of info that you need to know and memorize and recall and things like that, but they give you a lot of help with study guides and, you know, the syllabus, like whatever's in the syllabus is, you know, what you need to study. Don't be studying other things that aren't on there. And so I feel like it really, it isn't as terrifying as we think it is. And that's just for me. Other people feel differently. That's my thought. And then I think about, where do I go from here? I had a friend that asked, what is the goal with this? Like, what are you going to do with this certification? And I will admit that when I was home in California, I printed out all of the resources, like the syllabus, like study guide, practice test, practice tasting exam for the advanced Cicerone level, mostly because I wanted to use my mother's computer and her printer. But I know that for me, I want to continue. I don't really feel like I want to just stop and be like, okay, now I'm a certified Cicerone and that's it forever. Like, I want to keep learning and getting better at this type of thing. So my goal, I decided for myself, my goal is to try and take the advanced Cicerone exam next year, like a year from now. So I will give myself a year to study, and then I will hopefully, like, I don't know, maybe earlier in the spring, I'll schedule an exam. Because again, these are only offered at certain times, and I want to say that you still do the advanced written part online, and then there's an in-person tasting exam. So I'd have to figure out how to get to one of those. So yeah, that's my goal right now, and what I'm doing with my life aside from grape harvest. So I hope some of this info helped you. I know I get wordy, but I don't want to forget anything either. So if you have any questions or comments, or you know, you just need like a little like cheerleader, you're about to take your exam, you know, send me a message or you know, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you, because I want everyone to learn more about beer and teach other people about beer. So cheers, happy Oktoberfest, and I will see you next time.